Dr. Jazz.
But cool.
Dr.
Thanks for
Jazz.
taking the time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just jump in, and I'll start first with you wrote in your email you're composing these days a lot, and I wanted to ask you if you know, a new record is coming up slowly, or I know the last one was Sacred Hearts, if I'm not mistaken, but
Yeah,
what's the story
Hearts
there
was the last one.
of bandleading? I mean,
With that album, or
like in general, like if you're
what's the
preparing
story with
something.
Sacred Hearts?
First, like if you're preparing something new, I mean.
Actually, I started a project right before the pandemic started, January 1st of 2020, where I just got this idea to post one idea a day. It's called 365 Days of Practice.
Wow. Okay.
So I was posting an idea a day on Facebook and on Instagram, and with a little description, and you know, it kind of turned into this thing that people said I should make it turn into a book.
Oh,
since
okay.
Since then, I've been composing a little, but I haven't been working straight since then. But I basically, when I have time, I've been working on the book, and I just got a publisher. So the last 6 months or so have been really kind of just dedicated to that, because there's so much proofreading and going through everything. I had to make backing tracks and record all of them.
Man, okay.
So it's a lot of work.
That's
So
a lot.
I think we're close, maybe about within a week's time, it'll be ready to send off to be printed.
Wow, fantastic.
And I'm kind of looking forward to getting a chance to compose again. So kind of a long answer to your question.
No.
I have a bunch of little ideas that I know are going to turn into songs, but I haven't had time.
Yeah.
Sure. During the pandemic, though, I did do a bunch of kind of demos of songs that I had already kind of written. So almost like the next album's worth of material is finished.
Okay.
That's already kind of been done. So, but it's always nice to just sit down and start fresh, and
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
I'll first start you with the book here. What are, like, are these like kind of edits or like practices that you did every day, or like short snippets of a tune, or like what's there?
Yeah, well, the good thing about it is that I wasn't following any kind of structure, so which would have made it a little bit more difficult to plan out a whole year's worth of material. So it went from basic bebop kind of ideas at times to 12-tone ideas to play over 2-5-1s. I basically would, if I couldn't think of something, I would open up my notebook, find something that I liked, just write it, and then put a description. And it's all stuff that I've kind of practiced and developed over the years.
Oh, okay.
So basically lines, but some little melodies that could be turned into tunes. Some stuff where I took a basic kind of like a Charlie Parker line, but messed around with it a little bit. So just a bunch of different little things.
Oh, fantastic. So basically for all instruments, right? I mean, like not only for saxophone, like for guitar or whatever.
Yeah, it's for saxophone, but could be practiced on any instrument for sure. And there's a whole thing about my practice method that I use to develop a lot of these ideas. So that's going to be the first part of the book, is how I practice, how I come up with some of the material, and then the rest of it is the actual 365 days.
Wow, super, man. When is it coming out? So that we know. I mean, I know also when to find it.
Yeah, I think well, we're trying to get it done by January 1st, because in New Orleans it's called the Jazz Education Network Convention.
Yeah.
So we're trying to have it finished, because there's going to be a big convention in New Orleans. I'm going to be there. I'm playing, and it'll be nice to present the book and tell people they could go downstairs and get it. And so hopefully January 1st. And it's going to be called Rick Margitza 365 Days of Practice.
Wow, that sounds cool, actually. Okay, nice. Looking forward to this. Beautiful. Yeah. But just we mentioned Sacred Hearts before, and I just listen today, like, and these days to your music a lot. Like I went back to those records like Color and
Mhm.
Hope and all that stuff, and when I play with my daughter, she's like 11 months, and we'll listen basically to jazz, and she's like, "Yeah, okay."
Oh, I
And
love it. I love
yeah,
it.
it's so cool that. And but I wanted to ask you about Sacred Hearts. I mean, in general, also about your composing. How do you do it? You said you love to sit down, and there's always like, Truth Be Told and Crying from the last record. There's such beautiful melodies,
Mhm.
and I think you lay so much
Thank
importance
you.
on melody. Like, what's your process
Hmm.
of composing? I mean,
Uh, well, I try not to write from one. I try not to write the same way all the time. So sometimes a tune will start because I found a bass line on the piano. Sometimes it'll be because I found a melody in the saxophone.
yeah.
Sometimes it'll be because I sit down at the piano and find a nice chord progression or something that I find kind of interesting. I do write a lot in Logic because
Okay.
I'm not that great of a piano player. So sometimes I'll find like just a loop of a rhythm that I would maybe not imagine because I'm not a drummer. So I get the rhythm going and I'll improvise to it. And you kind of just wait for that moment where something feels like, okay, this could turn into something.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm really influenced a lot by classical music and the process of how like Mahler, and he's probably my favorite guy, but
Oh,
how
really?
they looked at
Interesting.
developing an idea. Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, sometimes I also just think of a title, and the title will actually feel like something. So it could come from words as well. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, that's good.
that's
Yeah, yeah.
kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's like many musicians that I talk to use also this approach. Yeah, just like to get some words together, and then this evokes something like
Yeah, yeah,
lavender sky or something like. Oh shit! Okay, that's a nice
exactly. Yeah,
ballad, whatever.
exactly. Sometimes the hardest part of writing a tune is finding the title. Sometimes I have a tune finished, but I can't find the right title, and it goes a long time before I find something that feels right for that particular mood or whatever.
Yeah,
But
yeah. It's like I usually go to poetry and read a
yeah,
poem, and I like
absolutely.
steal, like two words together. Like, okay, shit, that sounds nice.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But Rick, I wanted to ask you, like, just go a little bit back. You mentioned Mahler, and obviously, I guess classical music is an important part of your vocabulary, like compositionally. But like, who were the first guys? Why did you get into jazz? Or was there a moment, late 70s, I guess, or mid 70s, I don't know, when you said like, shit, I want to do that? Like, was there an album or?
Yeah. Well, everybody in my family plays music. So I
Oh,
grew
okay.
up hearing my father's a classical violinist. He played in the Detroit Symphony for 35 years. So I grew up with a lot of classical music in the house. And his father, my grandfather, on his side, was a Hungarian gypsy violinist
Oh, wow. Okay.
because that's where we're from Eastern Europe, Roma.
Really?
So
Really? Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
hear, I, yeah. So I heard a lot of folk music from him, and then my grandfather on my mother's side was a jazz bass player. He played with Glenn Miller big band,
Wow.
and then he also played cello, and he played cello on Charlie Parker with strings.
Really? Oh, shit, man. That's
Yeah, yeah.
amazing.
Unfortunately,
Wow.
he passed away when I was really young, so I never got a chance to talk to him about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the cello at the beginning of Just Friends, the
Yeah.
kind of famous opening, is my grandfather. So
Oh,
that's
man.
really cool.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, and my father also played violin on a lot of the Motown music because he was in Detroit at the time all that stuff was happening. So I heard classical, I heard jazz, I heard R&B, and what did I miss? Folk music. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I heard all this in the house, and everybody in my family played. So I kind of just grew up with it around me. Um, and I heard, of course, Charlie Parker because my mother played me that record because she wanted me to hear my grandfather. So that was a big spark. And
Oh,
then I had a cousin. She was a little older than me, who was a drummer, who was really into the Brecker Brothers. so this was like when their second record came out. I remember hearing that one first, back to back. So
Yeah, sure.
whatever year that would be, 77, something like
Yeah,
that.
I think
And
so.
also,
Yeah.
maybe, yeah. And also she was really into Chuck Mangione. And that was before he came kind of popular with Feel So Good. So it was less commercial. Those first couple of records he did are actually quite amazing. A lot of kind of my influence composing it. I should mention earlier that I also like the Pat Metheny, Lyle Mays, Don Gronick, Jim Beard, the Yellow Jackets. All those guys are huge influences on my composing.
Okay.
So
Yeah, okay.
all that stuff is very, very melody based and kind of hook based. It's not completely straight ahead jazz, which is also obviously a huge part of my upbringing. So anyway, I really got into the saxophone player who used to play with Chuck Mangione, whose name is Jerry Nywood.
Oh yeah, okay, sure.
So he's one of my main influences, not harmonically. He's not like a, kind of a Coltrane kind of Brecker guy, but the most beautiful melodies and swinging, soulful, in tune. So it was a combination of kind of hearing those Brecker brothers, Chuck Mangione, and then Charlie Parker, and then I got introduced to Coltrane when I first went into high school, and that kind of
that's it, right?
All that then. All that kind of the same pot. Yeah.
Wow. How did you then? I mean, did you study jazz then afterwards?
Yeah. Well, I first started by I was in my junior high band. I just was in the stage band. I hadn't studied at first. I would come home and play along with records.
Oh, okay.
So I learned Jerry Nywood solos. I learned some Charlie Parker solos. This is before we had apps that slowed down. I just had a turntable that put it at 16 RPM. So yeah, I just learned by playing along with records and kind of playing by ear. And then when I got into, I guess around 9th or 10th grade, so around high school, I started taking jazz lessons with a great local bebop jazz player in Detroit, whose name also happens to be George Benson. His name he went by George Sax Benson, who was like an amazing guy, amazing roots, Detroit. He grew up with Tommy Flanagan and, all those Detroit greats. So I learned like how to play basically from him about scales and, the theory behind everything. And also had a really great teacher in high school who knew a lot about that. So kind of the technical understanding of it came after I had already established kind of a foundation of just hearing things.
Yeah. When did you decide to move to New York? What was that based on? I mean, like this decision. It's an obvious choice almost, but still.
Yeah, it was kind of the place where everybody has to go. Of course, I had been there a couple times just to hear some people play. Like I remember that Dave Liebman was playing with Quest, because I had some friends in Detroit, and we would always look at the clubs in New York, and we decided one time to drive to New York to hear Dave Liebman play.
Wow. Okay.
We drove to New York once. Yeah, we drove to New York once to hear Steps Ahead. It was the live recording called Paradox.
Oh yeah.
So New York was always kind of the logical place to go because of the energy and the history, and that's where you go to kind of make your connections and be really part of that lineage.
Yeah.
I went to school at Berklee School of Music in Boston. I went to school in Detroit for a semester. I went to University of Miami, and then I lived in New Orleans for a while. So when a lot of my friends from college moved to New York, they're all around, I guess around, the age is around 20, 21 years old when you finish. Since I jumped around and went to a couple different schools, and then I ended up living in New Orleans, I was a little later than everybody else. So I think I moved to New York when I was around 26.
Oh, quite late. Yeah.
So what was cool is I already had a lot of friends who were already in New York, so I wasn't kind of breaking into it cold. I kind of had a little bit of a cushion.
How was it like for when you came there? You know, I mean, like in New York, there was like you mentioned, Brecker, Liebman, Grossman, Bob Burke, Bill Evans was coming. Like, oh,
Hmm.
I mean, just the saxophone players. It's just, you know, Minster. I don't know. I can list so many guys, Lovano. Like, how was it for you, like when you came like mid 80s to New York and getting gigs and
So um, when I look back on it now, I was living with a small community of musicians. We were all in Astoria in Queens. So, when you're younger like that, you don't really think about it as paying dues. It was just so great to be there. But, we were
exactly?
playing in bars sometimes for $30, $40, playing weddings, doing whatever we had to do to survive. But doing a lot of playing and jamming during the day with each other. And then, of course, if, for example, if Liebman, I think, yeah, of course, I heard Liebman while I was living in New York at some point. You look in the Village Voice and see who's playing.
Sure.
So then you go hear those guys. Go to the Vanguard every Monday night to hear the Thad and Mel big band. So that they weren't all great paying gigs, but just the fact that you're playing in New York with great musicians and making these connections. And then every once in a while you get lucky with something and you go and you tour in Europe, or you do a few gigs or a festival in Europe, which paid more money than the gigs do in New York. So
When was the first
I
time
guess at that
you went to Europe? With whom was that?
the first time,
We're going way back
well, other
now.
than going, yeah, well, I played the Montreux Festival and a small tour, but this was when I was at the University of Miami when our college big band went, so that
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
really part of it. I met, actually, I think the first time was somewhere around 89 or 90, after the first record or second record, after Color was recorded. I met a guy, I think he was Bulgarian. His name was Angel Rangelov. He was
Hmm.
a composer, and he had a big band, and he had some connections with the Umo big band in Helsinki.
Yeah.
So he put me together with them, and he came over and conducted them with some of his music. So I think that was the first time is Finland.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, fuck. You mentioned Color. How did then Color happen? I mean, I listened to Color today, and it's, you know, it starts with that Widow's Walk, which is such a beautiful tune, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Thank you.
and it's on Blue Note. And like, how did all this happen? You know, like the
So the
players are
Blue Note
amazing.
story.
You know, like how did all this Color story behind it happen?
Well, it's actually the thing about it, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You know that phrase. So that what actually had something to do with it. It's pretty amazing. My high school band director was named Jack Pearson, who had spent a little time playing with Cannonball
Hmm.
Adderley, and so he is definitely a big influence on my music, because he was really in the scene, and he was really into Warren Marsh and Lenny Tristano and that whole school. So he implanted this seed early on in terms of you should always try to sound like yourself
Hmm.
and don't play cliches. So he was a huge influence. Anyway, so his son, who was a little younger than me, um, we met in Detroit, and we were in a couple high school jazz camps together. He played trumpet. He moved to New York before I did and got a job working as an intern at Blue Note Records.
Hmm.
So this is when I was in New Orleans. He called me and said, "You know what? If you put together a demo tape, I can get it to the president of Blue Note, and maybe they'll do something." So I put together this tape, including some live stuff I had, and then we went into the studio and recorded a couple tunes. One of them being "Widow's Walk" as a demo,
Hmm.
and I sent it to Matt. And Matt, yeah, so I think I mentioned his name is Matt
Matt
Pearson.
Pearson. Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
That's so. Yeah.
So Matt got it to Bruce Lundahl, who was president at the time, and said, yes, tell him we want to do a record.
Wow. Okay.
So it was literally, it was literally kind of that easy. And at the same time, I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point.
Yeah.
Matt also sent the same tape to Tommy LaPuma, who was in the studio recording a Mandla with Miles.
Yeah.
Just
wow,
to
man,
see
that's
what
crazy.
So,
wow.
Yeah. So I'm in New Orleans, and before I moved to New York, I got a call from Tommy LaPuma saying, "Rick, it's been a while. Sorry it took so long, but I just played the tape for Miles over the phone, and Miles said to tell you that you have a job."
Oh my God,
So
that's crazy, man.
I got the gig.
Okay.
I got the gig with Miles and the Blue Note recording as a result of this demo tape that Matt had passed on. And Tommy said, "It's too bad you're signed with Blue Note because we would love to have you at Warner Brothers." So I said, "Well, I didn't sign any contracts yet," which was pretty amazing. I wasn't even trying to make this happen. I was just kind of saying, "Well, I didn't really sign a contract." So before I even moved to New York, I had these two major labels kind of bidding against each other for me, which is
amazing.
Now, when I think about it, it's pretty amazing. But back then, I was just so naive. I guess luckily so. So I chose Blue Note because of the history and also because of Matt being there, and he was kind of like my ally. And so as a result of this kind of bidding war, my lawyer basically negotiated a really good deal for those first couple albums. And they said, Bruce said, "You guys just go in there and do what you want to do." So in a way, when I listen to the record, there's some good stuff on it, but it's also a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this. It doesn't really have a complete direction. But there's so anyway. Of course, I was really influenced, like I said, by Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays and that whole school. So that first record that I didn't want to just do a jazz album. I wanted to do something that is more kind of in that world. And then the same thing with Hope. Is that which is more of those kind of recordings with vocals and percussion and orchestration and synths and all that kind of stuff. The thing was, we were so naive, we didn't realize that we were spending so much money that ultimately we had to recoup some of it, and we didn't. So by the time it came down to the third record, we already owed Capitol Records, who was like the parent company of Blue Note, a lot of money. So
shit, man.
We said, okay, let's just go and record a standard live to 2-track, which was called "This Is New," and a lot of people say that that's one of their favorite records of mine, and to me, that's probably the least favorite of mine.
Interesting.
Just because I didn't like my sound on it. I didn't think that I played very well. And this thing about if you always look back, would you do it differently? If I would have done things differently, I maybe would have made that record first, because those first two albums, we did pretty well in terms of sales and jazz charts and all that kind of stuff. But the critics, it was a mixed reaction, because a lot of people said these records shouldn't be on Blue Note because of the history of Blue Note. So maybe if I would have established myself as a player right off the bat first, and then did the other things once I had a little bit more notoriety or whatever. But
I like
another universe.
I like that you did original music. I mean, still, that's then another standards album. It's like
exactly. I mean, I did what I did, and it worked out the way. So
I mean, there are still beautiful records. Like I said, I mean, the compositions are really nice. Like there is, the Pat Metheny. I remember today, like I looked to this one tune, like Color Scheme, and I was like, that sounds very Metheny. Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
Beautiful records. I mean, but I wanted to ask you about your connection with Marc Johnson. How did you come up with him, like a connection with him? Because he's on both those first two records, for instance.
Yeah. Well, I remember the first time I met him, there was a club in Washington, D.C. called the One Step Down. And I had played there once with Andy Laverne,
Mm.
who was an excellent pianist. I haven't, I did a couple of his records for Steeplechase.
I have the Frozen Music I have, and some others.
Frozen Music, yeah,
Severe
yeah,
Clear.
yeah.
I think I have those too. Yeah,
yeah,
those are beautiful. Yeah.
So so Andy got this gig at the One Step Down, and he called Marc to play on it, and I forgot who played drums, and I just met Marc on those gigs, or that one. I think we played one night, and it was amazing to play with him. Of course, I was aware of him and was playing with Bill and all that stuff. So when it came time to do the record, he was just kind of one of my first choices, basically. Yeah, and he was really fun to be in the studio with, and of course totally professional. And
what about Adam Nussbaum and Peter Erskine, like those guys?
Adam, I had also done a local a gig somewhere I think it was at McKell's in New York when that club was happening, and I knew him because there's this piano bar called Bradley's, where that's where all the musicians would go hang afterwards. And I remember that Quest's rhythm section without Liebman. So it was Richie Byrack, McClure, and Adam were playing there. And I forgot who I knew first. Maybe I had met Richie through Liebman. But anyway, I went in there to sit in once. And I just played with that trio for a couple tunes. And that's when I first met Adam. So as a result of just being in New York and meeting him, of course, I loved the way he played.
Yeah, sure.
And then Joey, I had already known because we met each other in 1989. There was this thing going on called the Hennessy Cognac Jazz Search. So I had a band from Detroit, and he was in a band from New York, and we all made it to the finals in LA. And our band from Detroit won, which was great. But I became friends with Joey just because we were there. And of course, I was aware of him playing with Michael, so everything kind of just came together. And then when it came time to do the second recording, the nature of the music was kind of similar to Color, but a little different. And Peter, because of his playing on Weather Report and his sound in the studio and all that stuff, he seemed like he would be the perfect guy to do that.
Yeah, and Peter and Marc, I mean, that's like the bass desires, and the Abercrombie trio.
Exactly.
It's like they're like so beautiful to hear them together. It's just incredible. Interesting. Rick, I wanted to. I mean, you mentioned Miles before. I know you've answered probably this tons of times, but I will not bore you with that. I didn't listen to any other interviews with you just to be surprised by any info you get. But I just wanted to ask you, like, what was your, what did you learn most like that from playing with him? And he was collecting young guys since the 80s and your experience touring and.
Well, when I first met him, I was still living in New Orleans. Tommy said Miles wants to meet you, so I flew to New York. And it's funny, I don't really have it's like I don't have any memory of flying there or where I stayed or how I got into the city. It's kind of a blank to me, but I just had to go to his apartment. He lived on Central Park South. It was a building called the Marriott Essex House. It was like a hotel, but they also had people who owned condos there. So I just remember when I got to his door, there's a sign that said, "Please take off your shoes." So I stood there with my horn and my shoes for about 10 minutes because I was terrified. I didn't know he was going to ask me to play or what it was going to be. So I finally got the courage. I knocked on the door and he opened the door and he had this amazing smile on his face. And it was the vibe was so cool that he immediately put me at ease. So I went in and he basically was looking for a cassette on this table that was full of a bunch of junk. And he gave me a tape. He said, "I'll see you on stage." Wow. So no rehearsal. I had seen that band a couple times. So I kind of was aware of how the show was structured. it was the band with Foley and Ricky Wellman and Benny. So it was more of a pop
Popish.
gig. It wasn't
kind of,
there wasn't a lot of interaction, and those guys were not really jazz musicians, except for the keyboardist Kei Akagi, and so, and also his idea was it was going to be 2 saxophone players. So I would join the band with Kenny Garrett still being there.
Okay.
And we played one concert. Yeah, we played one concert, and then after the concert, Miles, he actually fainted. He collapsed after the concert, so he was not in great health. So the next day, we get on the bus, and he said, "I'm sorry." He said, "But it's too much energy for me to have another person on stage right now." He said, "So I'll call you when Kenny leaves." So I played one concert with Miles, and then I went back to New York the next day, or 2 days after. They give me like 2 weeks pay, and he said, "I'll call you when Kenny leaves." And so I was home for a while, and it was very strange because I was back in New Jersey playing weddings, and it's like, what just happened, But it was about a month later where I got a call, and it was from Miles. He said, "Kenny just left, and we need you," because it was very last minute. So that is when I went out on tour. It was the summer of 1989, and we did 6 weeks all through, a lot of stuff in Italy. We played Stockholm, I think, and we played in France a couple concerts. So that was the bulk of my playing with him, was kind of the second time.
Wow.
And
crazy.
Of course, when people think about Miles, you think about space and his use of space. So that was, you asked me what I learned. That's one of the main things, is that you could create all this drama and tension by not playing.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So, we'd be playing these tunes that are just one chord vamps going on for a while, and it would be his turn to solo. And he would just walk around the stage and pretend like he was going to play, and then he wouldn't play.
Yeah.
So when I finally did come in with just one note, sometimes it was like the tension was just so strong, and he just kind of made everybody just, So of course I learned that to not play so much. I mean, there are a couple of videos of me playing with him on YouTube, and of course I'm overplaying. I don't think I leave any space at all. So it's like these lessons I learned after the fact. I listen back now, and I do have a couple live tapes that are better than the videos.
But... Oh, really? Oh, man. Good.
Yeah.
Would love
just
to
audio tapes, no video. So anyway, it is what it is. And I also realized that he didn't improvise everything from night to night. He had certain things that he would play, but it was always in different places. So this idea of manipulating your language, as opposed to just pulling out melodies from thin air all the time, I learned that lesson of that. And of course, he's not the first one to do that. When you listen to Charlie Parker, there's a lot of stuff that he played, but always in different places. So that part of it was a lesson just to be part of and to witness.
And how was it like traveling with that band?
It was, a lot of it is like a blur to me. I don't remember that much. I mean, I wasn't completely welcomed by some of the guys because they wanted me to be Kenny Garrett.
Interesting. Yeah, sure.
So there's a little bit of that going on, and so I kind of just kept to myself. But I became friends with some of the guys more so than others in the band, and some of the people in the crew. Actually, we hung out. Miles, I didn't talk to him that much because I didn't want to say anything stupid.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I kind of waited for him.
I'd be the same, man. Yeah.
So I kind of waited for him to speak to me, and there wasn't a lot of interaction because we would just go do the sound check, and he would just show up for the gig. So every once in a while at the airport, we'd see each other. and talk a little bit.
Yeah.
So we were playing this slow blues every night, and I got the courage up. I said, Miles, I said, I feel so corny on this blues. I don't know what to play. And he said, you couldn't play corny if you tried to. So that is just his seal of approval, gave me confidence. And he said, just think of it in three.
Okay.
Which made a lot of sense, but it's so simple. But so if the blues is 1, 2,
Yeah.
it's like slow. But if you think about it in 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, then it turns into a waltz. So the subdivision is smaller. So there's, so like that little nugget was really important to me. Those kind of things.
Sure.
He also says, don't lift your fingers up so high. Because when I play, I tend to play like this as opposed to keeping my, so that was pretty amazing that he noticed.
Wow,
saxophone technique.
You wouldn't think so.
It wasn't
right?
about what I was playing, but how I was playing.
Interesting.
And we'd sometimes be at the airport, and one thing I found out is that he would, in his room, he would paint a lot, but he also would sit at his window with the binoculars and just watch people.
Yeah.
So he loved just observing human behavior. So like we'd be at the airport and he'd see a couple and he'd say, they're going to break up. She's going to leave him. Or he would say, that guy used to be a junkie.
Interesting.
So he was just really into, talk about human nature, the Michael Jackson tune used to play a lot, right?
Yeah.
So he was really into that. So that was kind of fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, he's gone through everything.
I did that 6-week. I did the 6-week tour, and there was a break before the next tour. And in the meantime, Kenny Garrett, he called Miles and said he wanted to come back. And those first couple of gigs, I had a contract that I had signed, so I wasn't going to be able to make the first gigs for the next. So there's this kind of overlap so I never got a chance to go back out again, which of course would have been amazing because I would have had some time to regroup and reflect on it and then get back out there and feel a little bit more confident. But it is what it is. I had the chance to do it. And
oh man, come on. It's already that you get to share this and this, these stories and memories and quotes like from one of the inventors of the music, actually. I mean, that's,
of course.
That's incredible.
Of course.
But when you came back to New York, I mean, or after the Miles experience, I have you on so many records, from Eddie Gomez to Jimmy Haslip to, I don't know, Steps Ahead Connections. Like, how did you enter then this scene? Like, did people start calling you because of Miles, seeing you with Miles, or like, how did you enter all these studio dates?
It was a combination of that, and it was a combination of that. Of course, that helped.
Yeah.
People realizing that I played with him, who was that guy, and then my Blue Note records came out, so also word spread, or because it is kind of a small community.
Sure. Yeah.
Word of mouth, me going to sessions, me going to people's gigs, me meeting them, them hearing something and asking me to play.
The usual.
So kind of like, it really hasn't changed that much. That's what you do. You just network, and if people like the way you play, they call you to do things. You have to be out there on the scene. You have to, but of course, playing with Miles and having the records out on Blue Note, that obviously put me in the limelight, so to speak. So
yeah. What about Maria Schneider? I mean, I love those records you did with her. Like, how did you connect with Maria?
Yeah. When I first moved to Paris, people asked me what I miss about New York, and that's one of the first things I said is playing in her band. We crossed paths briefly in Miami when I was going to school. As I was leaving, she was just coming there, I think. I'm pretty sure. So we knew each other briefly there. We knew of each other, of course. And when I first moved to New York, she was still, she was married to trombonist John Fedchuk.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a big band. And when I moved there, they asked me to join it.
Okay.
And so the Monday night gig at Visiones was happening for a while. And it was half her music and half John's music. They ended up divorcing. and for a while he still stayed in the band. And then at some point, he was also, I think he had already started a big band of his own, but
yeah.
slowly but surely the two bands separated, and I played in both of them.
Oh wow, okay.
But John didn't have a steady thing, so it was only whenever he would get a gig or a recording or something. But the thing with Maria was the Monday night at Visiones that lasted for a couple of years, and that's one of my most memorable experiences, just playing with her and that band kind of
it's like
turning into what it turned into.
Yeah.
I mean, so when I left, I was lucky enough to be in those first couple of records, but her style became even more Maria.
Yeah,
you know, her voice, personal
yeah.
voice kind of. So I miss not being part of those recordings because I love the music on those so much. But yeah, she's a genius. I mean, I don't know if you've heard the record she did. It's called Winter Morning Walks.
No, that one I didn't. It's a recent one,
yeah, because it's not her big band. It's a classical record of. It's a setting of.
I should write it down.
I think Portuguese poetry.
Wow. Okay.
But that's been translated, and an American poet, and it's with the classical soprano singer named Dawn Upshaw. So it's Maria with chamber orchestra and this classical voice, and it's top 5 most beautiful records I have. I mean, I've ever heard.
I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yeah, it's really, really extraordinary. So, because to hear Maria writing for strings and really, really great.
Yeah, I mean, already those coming about and Allegrese and like those are amazing. Like just the arrangements of the horns, and you know, it's just like really. I mean, and the rhythm section, of course, it's killing. It's just beautiful.
Concert in the Garden is a great one.
Oh, yeah.
That one I miss not being on.
Yeah, but no, beautiful. You know, I love that stuff. The first 2 Enjo ones, and then Allegrese, beautiful stuff. You could hear her voice already. The arranging voice,
she's very special. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you before already, like, and you said you've been in Paris for 20 years now. How come you moved to Paris and after basically making a name in New York already? And
I moved because at that time I think it was around 2003. First of all, I'd been traveling to Europe a lot over the years, and always thought that I would work more playing creative music if I was in Europe than I was in New York. Because in New York, you'd still be playing with great musicians, but not making a lot of money and having to play weddings and then do a lot of traveling to Europe to make a majority of your income. So I had always kind of planted that seed. I always loved Paris. I planted that seed with some friends who lived here, but I never thought it would really happen. And I was living in an illegal sublet in New York at the time, and we got discovered by the landlord. So I had a month or so to find a new place to live, and it's more difficult now, I think, but still, even back then, to try to find a place to live in New York that you can afford, it's difficult, right? So right at this time, a friend of mine who was living in Paris called me and said he was getting ready to move, and if I wanted to, he would just sign the lease to my name.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the universe gave me an apartment in Paris, and I started playing with this band called the Mouton Reunion Quartet. It's Francois. So Francois
Incredible.
Louis. So Francois lives in New York, so that's where I met him, and I played with that quartet, and they asked me to join the band. So I also then had a gig with a band here in France. At the same time, I was offered this apartment. So it seemed like the universe was saying you should do this. And I thought if I didn't like it, I could always move back, but I didn't want to regret not taking the chance. And I think sometimes when the universe shows you stuff, if you go against what it's showing you, bad things could happen. So I got really lucky. I found an apartment. I needed an apartment. I got asked to join this French band. and I've always wanted to be here. And Paris is kind of the hub of Europe, so it makes traveling to the rest of Europe relatively easy. And then after a couple of years, I finally got this little teaching job here in Paris, which made me legal, so I was able to get my residency card and health insurance and be part of the system here. So the quality of life is much better, especially as you get older. All those things kind of just
makes sense.
Of course, I still miss New York. Yeah.
Do you still go to New York every now and then?
I miss certain things about. Not that much. I haven't been there. It's funny because I was with the Mouton brothers for almost 10 years. We played about 9 years, and because they have money from some different French societies, they were able to fund tours in the States. So it's kind of ironic that I was playing and touring more in the States with a French band living in Paris than I did when I was living there.
Ironic, yeah.
So we would go to New York and play a couple times a year with them, but it's been a while since I've been there and played. I definitely miss it, but.
What about the Paris scene? Like, if you compare it to New York, I mean, obviously it's different, but still.
Yeah, well, it's opened up a lot. When I first moved here, there weren't as many places to play or to jam, and within the last year, a couple of years, there's a jam session almost every night of the week. If you really wanted to go out and play, you can find places. Of course, it's different. I just turned 60, so I'm not out there as much. I don't have the energy, and I don't feel the desire to. But when I first moved here, I was still, so I was around 40, and I was already kind of established. So I wasn't that into going out and playing all the time, but I did when certain people were playing. So it'd be different, obviously, if I moved to Paris and I was 25, I would be exploring the scene in a different way as opposed to moving when I'm 40. So for me, it was more about the quality of life being better and being a little bit more comfortable. I definitely missed the aspect of people getting together and playing in houses. So like in New York, I said when we lived there, we'd be playing 4 or 5 sessions a week during the afternoons. That wasn't happening. So I missed that aspect of it. And there are some great drummers in Paris, but not as many as there are in New York. So I miss the drummers. I miss having more choices available in terms of that. Great pianists here for sure. Great bass players.
Did you find it easy leading bands when you were in Paris? I mean, you started leading bands.
Well, the other thing is because I've been coming here over the years, I already knew a lot of people. And I had some friends from the States. One of them who was living here. So once again, I moved into a scene where I was known as opposed to having to go into a scene cold and make connections. So no, it really wasn't that difficult because I already knew people. And when I first moved here, I was working a lot with the Mouton brothers. So I was, working enough. So it wasn't like I had to go out and kind of hustle my own stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. Rick, not to take too much of your time, I just wanted to ask you, like, I've read on your, I think you've played with almost everyone, but there are 2 names that popped up, which was Chick Corea and McCoy Tyner. How did these 2 occasions happen? And
yeah, well, I guess like a lot of us, well, I shouldn't speak for other people. The names look good on the resume. With McCoy, I only played 1 song.
Oh wow, man! Okay, when was that? Actually,
it was part of a Blue Note night where he was recording for Blue Note, and it was a thing that they put together where all the Blue Note artists they put together like a special concert. So
but still, come on, okay.
Yeah, so I played with him. We talked a little bit. Once again, I was so afraid and shy at that point that I just wanted to, kind of get out without making a huge error. So we played. It was okay. It was at Carnegie Hall, and the sound was terrible. The drums were really loud. The monitors weren't working, so it wasn't a great musical experience because it was just uncomfortable. But I got a chance to play with him. But I'm glad there isn't a video of that because it was probably a disaster. With Chick, it was I had been asked to join Eddie Gomez's quartet.
Okay.
I think I was recommended by, I forget who, but Dick Oates did a lot of playing with Eddie.
Yeah.
But at this point, Dick was busy, so I got the chance to play with Eddie.
Yeah.
And this is when Chick had the label called Stretch.
Yeah.
Stretch Records. So Eddie asked me to do the recording, which Chick produced.
Next Future. Oh yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Next Future.
Yeah, it's European.
And then he also
kinda,
played on the. Yep. Yes. So Chick played on the recording. So that I actually played several songs with him and worked in the studio a little bit. So I got a chance to know him better than I did McCoy. But I never really played any concerts with him.
Okay.
Except in Las Vegas, which is where my parents live near Las Vegas. There used to be a Blue Note. And one time when I was there for the holidays, Chick's trio with Jeff Ballard and Avishai Cohen. They were playing at the Blue Note, and they were playing there for a week. So I went and sat in with them a couple nights. So that was really fun.
That would be nice to have a video of that, actually.
Yeah, that would be, I guess.
Wow.
Actually, this is kind of funny because Roy Haynes lives in Las Vegas, or he did at the time. And he was in the club, and we were trying to get him to come up to play, but he was drinking, so he didn't want to play. And we played, from Now He Sings, Now He Sobs. We played Matrix, the blues. Yeah, sure. So I almost played Matrix with Chick and Roy Haynes.
Oh, man. That would have been like, check. Wow, that's
exactly
incredible, man. Beautiful. Oh, it's so amazing. Yeah. Not to take too much of your time, Rick. Like, what is on the schedule for you for the upcoming weeks and months? I mean, you mentioned the new book, and do you have some tours or gigs coming up in the following months, or?
No big tours. It actually has been going on for almost 5 years. Now, we've been playing at this one club in Paris called Le Gare every Monday night.
Okay.
Of course, we stopped during the lockdown, and at first we were playing like for 3 or 4 months in a row. Then we would take a couple months off and then go back. But since the lockdown ended, we've been there every Monday for almost 3 years straight.
Wow, that's incredible.
So that is an amazing experience to have the same band at this really cool club with a lot of young people. So that's kind of an ongoing thing. That's a big part of what I've been doing these days.
Okay.
No plans to record anything yet, new under my own name, but I'm going to start composing soon. The book is coming out. I'm going to actually be going home for Christmas for the first time since COVID next week. So I'm just going to take a couple weeks off and hang with my family.
Yeah.
And there's a project that we recorded in, when was it? I don't know, about 6 months ago. There's a arranger here named Christoph Del Sasso.
Yeah.
And he arranged, so he arranged the 3 quartet for big band. Well, it's a small big band. So it's 2 trombones, 2 trumpets, bass clarinet, and then 3 tenor players with rhythm section. So he did all that music, but for this kind of
mini big band,
small or large, medium ensemble.
Yeah.
And we have some gigs coming up with that once the record is going to be released. So that's kind of fun.
Beautiful.
To play that music.
And just French musicians and yourself, or?
It's French musicians, and I think there's a trombone player who's from the States who's been here for a while. Yeah. Jerry Edwards, his name is. But the rest of the guys are French.
Oh, okay, super. I have to find the records when it comes out.
And there is one band that I recorded with. We haven't been toured in a while. It's called the Gypsy Tenors, and it's myself, Tony Lakatos on tenor, and another gypsy guy named gypsy guy named Gabor Bola.
Oh yeah, from Hungary. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so and he's an amazing player. So
Yeah.
that band called Gypsy Tenors is one of my favorite projects. We did a tour a couple years ago now, before COVID, I guess, so more than a couple. We did like 10 days in a row, 10 nights, and that was like some of the most fun I've ever had. So the problem with that band is that there's no leader. So it's really difficult to organize tours these days. So there's nobody to really put the time in. But
Yeah, take the initiative. Yeah.
I would like that to happen again.
Oh,
So
beautiful. Fantastic.
so
Well,
other than
okay.
that, kind of so other than that, just kind of isolated things. So go out and play with some friends in Italy who fly me over as a guest for a couple of days, and
Yeah.
Germany. Just taking advantage of, like I said, being kind
clear.
of central. Yeah.
Yeah, it's easier to travel. Yeah, beautiful. Cool, Rick. I will leave you a nice, what is today? Sunday. Paris Sundays evening. So, thanks for sharing some of these thoughts. I really appreciate it. Nice
Oh,
to
my
hear your
pleasure.
thoughts.
Thanks for asking me. It's great to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
And
And if
let's
you
stay in
have
touch.